Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, October 29th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. No matter what you may have heard, it is the Penn State game that is here in 4 days, the game against Michigan in 32 days. Today, you're going to be hearing all from Penn State head coach James Franklin. He had his weekly press conference on Monday. As always with James Franklin, lots of long, thoughtful answers, interesting things to come away from. You're actually going to get one show, this one, specifically on all the stuff he talked about with Ohio State related topics like former Ohio State wide receiver Julian Fleming, Central Ohio native Ethan Grunkemeyer, who's one of the backup quarterbacks, all that kind of stuff. You hear all about that on today's show. And because it is a big game week, we're going to be dropping some bonus episodes as well and have a whole separate episode coming just a little bit later on with information on all the injury situations that Penn State is dealing with. So that's coming up a little later on. But first, let's start with the Buckeyes, his thoughts on Ohio State. And just here was his opening answer, just some quick early thoughts. He always does this at press conferences. He'll kind of page through notes on the team and just kind of give some general thoughts. So here were some quick early thoughts from James Franklin on the Ohio State Buckeyes.
We talk about Ohio State, what they've been doing and what they've done, and Ryan Day and his career there, and the program in general. Obviously, a ton of respect of what they've been able to do for a long period of time under a number of different coaches. And then obviously how they're playing again this year. You look at them statistically, they're playing really good football pretty much across the board. Offensively, Chip Kelly there. I think Chip kind of has a reputation of a guy with a spread background and throwing the ball around, and I get that. But if you really study Chip, he's always had a strong running game, and you see that this year. It's a big part of what they're doing, 11 personnel and 12 personnel. Their quarterback, Will Howard, who transferred from Kansas State, is a big guy and playing really good football for him. Touchdown to interception ratio, QBR, all those things, doing some really good things. Obviously, a young man from Pennsylvania, so he'll have a bunch of support here from his family and friends. Travion Henderson is explosive, one of the most explosive running backs in the country, who we recruited out of high school and are very, very familiar. Quinshon Judkins, who we're also familiar with as well. Two really good running backs. And then obviously there's a bunch of receivers you could talk about. The guy that's getting a lot of buzz right now is Jeremiah Smith, the freshman. But there's a number of receivers that we could be talking about. Defensively, Jim Knowles, who's also a PA guy, is doing a really good job with their defense and has now for the last couple of years. Multiple scheme defense. Really, probably the thing that gets talked about the most is their three safeties that they play with. How they do it. He's been doing that in some form all the way back to his time at Oklahoma State, but is really doing a nice job. Their safety, Caleb Downs, who they got out of the transfer portal, is playing very well. Cornerback Denzel Burke, number 10. And then obviously two defensive ends that are challenging in Jack Sawyer as well as Tui Mau Lowell. I hope I said that right. I mean that with all due respect. But both of those defensive ends are playing extremely well and got a ton of respect for what they do and how they do it. And then on special teams, we think they do it by committee. Which some programs do that. Their kickoff coverage team has been really impressive. They've only allowed 5 returns this year. Lorenzo Styles really stands out on that unit. And then when you talk about their punt coverage team, that's another thing that kind of stood out to us. They've only had 3 returns on the year, doing a really good job. Their punters doing a really good job with punt location, hang time, things like that. So obviously we all know it's going to be a challenge. We're going to need a tremendous environment in that stadium on Saturday. Home field advantage is going to be something that's going to be very, very important for us. So we need this place rocking. No matter what time the game is, we need a great environment, and we need everybody in the stadium early. We need that place rocking. We need everybody standing and screaming on third down and critical downs and possessions. And this is going to be an all hands on deck game. So appreciate everybody's support and open up the questions.
Franklin was asked about the perception that Ohio State might be a little more physical now than they were in previous years, for example, in the run game and on defense as well.
I don't know if that's talk out there, media. I don't know. So I'm unaware of that conversation. All I can talk about is what I see on film. And obviously the last 2 years they've played really good defense. Really the last number of years they've played really good defense. But I think since Coach Knowles has been there, he's taken them to a whole nother level. And then offensively this year, like I mentioned in my opening statement, when you talk about Chip, there's a commitment to running the ball. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think that's always been the case if you look back at Chip over his history. And I think Chip has the experience and the ability to play to the strengths of his team. And I think he is clearly doing that right now.
Ohio State and Penn State have met every single year going back to the time the Nittany Lions joined the conference in 1993. And the Buckeyes have really been a hurdle that the Nittany Lions have really struggled to clear over almost the entire time of that series. That's been especially true since Franklin arrived. Over the last 10 games against Ohio State, Penn State has won just once. That was the 2016 game in Happy Valley. Have there been any common threads from the last 10 games between the Nittany Lions and the Buckeyes?
They're a really good football team. They're as talented of a roster as anybody in the country, and they're that way every single year. They are as well this year. We have to play really well. We have to play really clean. We're going to need a great environment. It's a challenge. And I think our guys are ready for the challenge. We're going to have a really good week of practice. But we don't need to change anything. We don't need to do anything more than what we've done each week, which is just trying to get better and refine our process. But yeah, that's the plan is be prepared for a really good team. It's one of the most talented teams in the country in our year in and year out. And also in terms of wins and losses, one of the most productive teams in the country. So we're fortunate to play them. We're excited about the opportunity, and that's what we're focused on, is the Ohio State team from this year and the Penn State team for this year, and what we have to do to find a way to get a win. And what I'm excited about is this team has showed all of our fans, all of our lettermen, our alumni, the students, everybody, that they're going to find ways to get the job done. And we're going to have to do that again this week against a really good team who's extremely talented.
Next up, a question that's a little more Ohio State adjacent than truly an Ohio State question, but he was asked about Ethan Grunkemeyer. He is a true freshman quarterback out of Olentangy High School in the northern suburbs of Columbus. Grunkemeyer has not thrown a pass yet this season for the Nittany Lions, but Franklin sounds like he's pretty high on him.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Grunk, and I think there's a ton of excitement in our program. Talk to our defensive coaches and talk to our defensive players about the respect that they have for Grunk. As you guys know, we got a relationship with Brad Mendler, and I think he's done a phenomenal job. There's a lot of excitement in our program about Grunk. He's really kind of a nice blend between Drew and Beau in some ways, and he makes some throws that are really impressive. So again, there's only so much time to go around, but I think I think Danny's doing a really good job, and I think Grunk is doing a really good job, just like you heard the conversations about with Beau, that those guys are preparing as if they're the starter, and that's one of those things that's easier said than done. But Grunk's improvement has been dramatic, and I think he's got a special future. We are fortunate to have those guys here. But I think, watching what happened on Saturday, I think that doubles down and reinforces to those guys, hey, I better have my stuff together. But there's only so many reps to go around. So if Drew is able to practice, and we're going to get reps to Beau, it's hard to now also get reps to the third guy, because if you're not careful, you spend all this time getting all of them ready and you get none of them ready, right? So that's the challenge.
This is a year when there is a lot that is very different about college football, the Big Ten, nationally. It's all over the sport. There's all sorts of new stuff. So how has the end of divisions in the Big Ten and the start of the 12-team college football playoff maybe changed some of the national perceptions around the Ohio State-Penn State game?
I'm not sure. I think it's been impactful. I was told for a long time it wasn't, that, it all levels out in the end. But I think we all know that that's not necessarily the case. So yeah, I think it probably changes some things. I don't think there's any doubt. I think it probably changes some programs in the East, maybe than it does change some programs in the West. I think some programs in the East are probably happy about the changes. Some programs in the West probably aren't happy about some of the changes. But I do think the expanded playoffs is a good thing for college football. I think the going away from the divisions in the Big Ten, I think is good for the Big Ten. I think one of the things that's interesting, right? Whether it's questions like this or whether it's when I'm working with the AFCA, you ask people to, vote or make decisions that are in the best interest of college football, not in the best interest of Penn State. So I think sometimes when you guys ask me these questions, I'm answering what's good for college football, not specific to Penn State. But I do think those two things have dramatically changed our game, and I think there's a lot of things that probably are still coming. Do we stay at 12 teams in the playoffs? I don't know. I think it probably grows. But it doesn't matter what the number is, somebody's going to complain, right? I think I've said that to you guys before. There's 64 teams in basketball? Is it 64? 68. And 69, 70, and 71 are complaining, right? Like, it's kind of always the case. So I think at the end of the day, we just got to find what the sweet spot is for the sport, what the sweet spot is for the universities, what the sweet spot is for the model in general. That takes everybody's best interest, the student athletes, the universities, the athletic departments, the other sports, all those things. But I do think they're good changes, because I just think it creates more opportunities and more people to be involved year in and year out. So it's not the same 3 to 5 teams every year.
Kind of a weird coincidence, but Penn State has had quite a run of quarterbacks from the state of Ohio. Liam Clifford, Drew Allar, and now Ethan Grunkemeyer, who you heard about earlier. Meanwhile, Ohio State starting quarterbacks the last couple of years have both come from Pennsylvania. Kyle McCord out of Philly, and now Will Howard as well. So is that just a coincidence, or is there something to that?
We've had quarterbacks from the state of Ohio. They've had quarterbacks from Pennsylvania. What that means, I'm not sure. Everybody across the country is going out and trying to get the best players they possibly can get. Sometimes that comes from your state. Sometimes that comes from other states. I think everybody knows we've put a huge emphasis on recruiting the state of Pennsylvania since I arrived here. We take a ton of pride in that. I want our guys to take as much pride in Pennsylvania football and our history and traditions as other states do. But more than that, I don't think there is more than that. I think at the end of the day, every program in the country, including ours, is trying to go out and get the best players they possibly can. And if it comes from the state of Pennsylvania, there's nobody more excited about that than me. And then if we have to go other places, then we'll do that as well. And I don't think it's a whole lot more than that.
In the era of the transfer portal, you're going to see this more and more. But you have a former starter from Ohio State, wide receiver Julian Fleming, now as a starter for Penn State, about to take on his former team. Fleming has had 10 catches, 148 yards, has not yet scored a touchdown this season for the Nittany Lions. But how big is this game for Julian Fleming personally, getting to take on his former team?
Yeah, obviously, whenever you play an opponent, that a member of our team came from that school, then for me to sit here and say that it's not a big moment and a big game for that individual, it is. Obviously, we don't want to spend time on that. I want Julian and our team to approach it like we do every single week, which every week it's the most important game we play. We want to refine our process and get better every single week, individually and collectively. And I want to do that again. And Julian is a super mature guy. He's been really good in our locker room. I'm very, very proud of him. I'm very glad he's here. But for us, I don't want Julian to treat this game any different than how he treated Wisconsin. And when I watch Julian, he prepares as hard and as well as anybody, and I want him to do that again. That's really it. But for me to sit here and say that obviously it's not a big game for him and his family, it obviously is, and I think it's obviously magnified with him being a kid from Pennsylvania that now is back home with us.
Well, that will do it for now. We'll be back again a little later on. Probably give you a few hours to let this one get into everyone's podcast feed, and then drop another episode with lots of other interesting stuff from James Franklin. Injuries are a big topic around the Nittany Lions right now. They've got the starting quarterback, one of their defensive ends, starting right tackle, all banged up right now. That's going to be a big storyline throughout the week. James Franklin said a little more than I was expecting him to, honestly, with about some of those guys during that press conference on Monday. So we'll let you hear from him on all that stuff, plus a bunch of other stuff, including potential change at quarterback and a little bit of a change for one of their defensive stars as well. So we'll be back with that a little later on. But that will do it for now. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.